right, let's get to our guest today. He is best known as the co-lead vocalist and guitarist from the band Triumph, although he did have a lot of success doing stuff outside of Triumph as well. And now he's an author. He's written a new book called Lay It on the Line, A Backstage Pass to Rockstar Adventure, Conflict, and Triumph. And it is Rik Emmett joining us live right now. How are you, Rik?
Edward Trunk Esquire. I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I wish I was an Esquire. I'd be making a lot more money.
Yeah, no,
How's
I'm doing
things,
good.
man?
I'm doing the rounds of interviews now, so, my throat might give out at any moment, but I'm doing good.
Well, fortunately, you just gotta talk and not sing when you do the interviews. As long as you don't have gigs lined up, you should be okay.
Yeah, no gigs lined up, although I am going to Sweden for New Year's.
Is that right? To play a gig or to vacation?
It's a kind of a long story, but I'll try to tell it short. I have some friends that play in a band that goes and plays the Junior World Hockey Championships, wherever they might be. And so this year they're in Gothenburg, Sweden. And so the Canadian contingent, they go on over there and it's like the moms, and it's a junior hockey, so it's the moms and the dads and the girlfriends and the brothers and the sisters, like families go and support them, and the Canadian contingent in the stands at these games is always sizable and crazy. So for New Year's, they always throw a big party, and they get a band to play, and they like to do Canadian classic rock kind of stuff. And so I have a couple of friends that have been in the band in past years, and they said, "Come on, Rik, you got to come." And I went, "Oh, I don't think so." And they said, No, Rik, we're going to do some Triumph songs this year. You got to come." Anyways, long story short, I'm going. They're going to have a string quartet and some horn players. And I went, well, I've never heard, Hold On and Lay It on the Line and Magic Power with strings and horns before, so that sounds like it'll be fun. All right, I'm coming. So,
is it a challenge for you at this age, at this point in your life, to sing the old Triumph songs?
Oh, yeah, of course, yes. And in fact, like, for example, Magic Power was originally in the key of D, and it sounds pretty good in that key. It's a very guitar-friendly kind of key and stuff, open guitar strings, all of those sorts of things. But I redid it in the key of A, so I dropped it down like a whole, either a fourth or a fifth, depending on which way you're looking at it. But when it's in A, you can really kind of give it the Pete Townsend beat the crap out of the guitar treatment. So it's kind of fun to do it that way. And I went, okay, I'll do it that way. Now, Lay It, I kind of had to do a little bit of you remember when Eric Clapton redid Layla and turned it from
Yes.
the, screaming rock version into the very laid-back swung kind of bluesy thing. I didn't go quite that far, but I kind of gave it the same treatment and dropped some of the melodies down a bit and made it a little easier to handle. So, Hold On, there's really no way around it. You got to do it in the original key. But, I don't know if you ever saw Queen. You may be too young for this, but I saw Queen live a few times when they were touring back in the day. And Freddie would often sing melodies. He would transpose them and move them down. He wouldn't sing them in the original recorded, keys because, after you've done 3 nights in a row, like there's just no way you can hit the high notes anymore. So you got to start becoming creative,
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know. I only saw Queen once with Freddie. It was on the last tour, but I did on Hot Space. But I didn't know him being the singer that he was. I didn't even know he had to do that at some point. But obviously, it's the norm now for a lot of acts that tour that the singers get a bit older. And the reason why I brought that up to you is because, and we're going to get into your book here in a second. But one of the things that I had gotten a call about maybe a year or so less ago was that the producer, Mike Klink, got in touch with me and told me he was working on a Triumph tribute record. And he told me that he couldn't find name singers that could sing your stuff. The stuff that Gil sang, he could find singers for because it wasn't so high, but he said he couldn't find like enough people that would go after your songs and be able to sing in that key, original key on those songs.
Yeah, no, it's true. And when I talked to Mike, I said, well, you're going to have to find females. That might be part of your solution. And the other side of it is, they're kind of looking for people that have made a name for themselves. But the world of rock, I mean, it kind of changed. After the Triumph era, the era came in with grunge and Nirvana and Eddie Vedder and Creed, and so all of the singers, it became this much darker, kind of heavier kind of sound, and so you didn't get a new generation of guys that sang up there with me, Geddy, Robert Plant, John Anderson, and I can remember. We once, 83, we were out doing some stadium shows, and Journey was the headliner, and it's like Steve Perry even came to me and said, "Man, are you hitting high B's in that song? Are you hitting a high D and a high E?" And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, every night." He's going like, "You're out of your mind." But, of course, I remember, when I was a kid, I would go to see Deep Purple concerts and Ian Gillan, and they would do like Child in Time, and he would be hitting high A's, and I'm talking about, the note that sits at the 17th fret of the E string of a guitar, and Ian Gillan would be doing this screaming head tone kind of thing, hitting these, and they were high A's, and I go, okay, well, we don't really have a world like that anymore, but there's some metal guys that could do it. Maybe they were just going like, yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, but I always wonder about this too, Rick, with that kind of stuff. And I've asked singers this, like, okay, so back in 81 or whatever, you're singing Magic Power and you're much younger and you're doing that and it's, it's kind of comfortable for you or whatever. But in the back of your mind, are you saying to yourself, damn, if this thing becomes a hit in 40 years, I'm painting myself into a corner having to do it?
No, come on now, bud. You're talking about rock stars. Rock stars don't sit around thinking about things 40 years from now, Like,
right.
Yeah, like you're living in the moment, and
right.
Well, and there's another part of you, of course, which is that egotistical kind of, the testosterone of youth. You're going to live forever. You're going to be able to do this forever. I can do this now. Why wouldn't I be able to do this forever? So, you don't really, people warn you about growing old and you're not paying any attention.
Right. It's very true. So let's talk about your book, Lay It on the Line. It's out. I'm assuming it's out now, right? Is it available everywhere now?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. And, they can get it at Amazon or they can get it at their local bookstore. Or, it's on ECW Press. So, there's probably, I don't know, 1,000 ways you can order it online one way or another. But yeah, the book is out. Yes.
So I enjoyed it. I have it. I was on a plane over the weekend. I had a chance to get into most of it. And the first thing that struck me about it, Rick, was it's the format of it and the way you did it is a bit different than your traditional autobiography. When I was telling my audience about you coming on, I called the book an autobiography, but I said, but it's a bit different because the way you pace it, the formatting of it, and there's almost elements of it where it almost becomes like, if you want to be a musician or you want to know about this, where it's almost an advice book at some point, where it's like your experiences but relayed in a different way. So tell me about your approach to doing this versus the traditional format of an autobiography.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, I felt very strongly that I really only wanted to do this once. So, if I'm going to do more writing, and I love writing, and I think I've written a book of poetry before this, I would hope that I might have a few more of those in me. I might even have a novel in me at some point. I'm not sure. But, of course, I always want to keep songwriting and doing that. So I will continue writing and being creative. When you decide you're going to do, autobiography or biography or memoir, you're going back into the past and you're bringing up the things from your life. And so I'm not really a backwards looking kind of creative person. I like to be moving forward. I like to be in this moment and be looking at the horizon going, hey, I wonder what's up there. So that stuff, as I approached the book, I was thinking, okay, well, here's an example. The Triumph chapter, which is called the Triumph chapter, it's only one chapter in about 16. And as you described, there's ones that talk about being in the music business. There's ones that talk about playing guitar and how much that means to me. And those things are like being a family man, being a dad, being a husband. All of those things meant more to me than being a rock star. And so they end up, and of course I taught college for 20 years, like my life was one where the early part of my week was about going into the college and teaching a few days. And then the weekends were like, okay, climb on a plane, fly out, go play some gigs, come back home, repeat, ad infinitum. So, that idea of teaching, it's always kind of been a part of me. And as I was putting the book together, I was thinking, well, there was one time where I wrote an article for, I wrote for Guitar Player magazine for, 19 years. I can't remember how long, 13 years, something like that. I was in the band for 13. I think I wrote for the magazine for 14 or 15. I can't remember exactly. Anyhow, but I wrote an article for a retailer, a music retailer here in Canada that was in their sort of yearly catalog, and it was like my top 10 hits for trying to teach musicians, if you want to have a career in the music business, this is what. And so I'd already distilled that knowledge down into a magazine article. I went, well, this should be included in some kind of chapter that's about that kind of thing, because I don't want the memoir to just be something that only has a value of, and believe me, I read a lot of memoirs and did research and stuff, and I hate the ones where the guy essentially takes his day book and goes, on Tuesday we were in Ohio, and then on Wednesday we climbed on the bus, and you go, yeah, I don't really care. It doesn't have much value to me. It doesn't really have a lot of weight, So I was looking for things that might have a little more meat on the bone,
Yeah, well, no doubt. And I think it's going to be really, for Triumph fans, enjoy reading it. But just even if you're not the hugest Triumph fan, just your story, and also people that maybe are aspiring musicians, to learn the story a little bit and learn of your experiences and how varied they are. And, one of the things I kind of took from this, Rik, is like, as you laid out you getting into Triumph and how Gil and Mike came to see you and all of that, and they had already had something cooking. And then it seems like, because you say in the book you were never in it for the sex and drug stuff, you were in it for the music. But and tell me if I got this wrong, but it almost felt like you got into Triumph, the band took off to some degree, but it really, you never really felt like you were going to be in it for the long haul. You're almost kind of reluctantly in it for as long as you were. Do I have that right?
Well, obviously in the early days there was no reluctance. I was, jumped in with both feet and both arms, and a big fat head, and I was in there. And I think the story of that is that in the early days the band was Three Musketeers, all for one, one for all, and it really felt like that's what we were doing. And then after it had had success and started to climb, I do think that there were things like the very things that gave the band strengths, which was that I was kind of this creative writer, singer, guitar player kind of guy. The drummer Gil was really smart and really good at general management of the band, the booking agency end of things, the live stage production end of things, that side of what the music business is like. And Mike was really good at radio and really good at marketing and promotion, and he was a pretty good sales guy, so that kind of stuff made it so that we were kind of covering all the fronts. We didn't really need a manager, and we didn't after making the record deals. We were self-managed, and it was really the other guys that did most of the business, and I would be in the studio working on my own. And so these were the strengths as the band developed. But then as successes started to happen, and it was like, oh, Rik wrote these songs, and now Rik is getting played on the radio, but Rik's videos get played on MTV, and and I'm in some ways I think it's probably the same thing that happens when, I don't know, in much larger kinds of circumstances. You've got, say, the Police, and you've got Sting, and it's looking like, well, the guy could write his own ticket if he wanted to, and then eventually he decides, I think I will. Like, I'm tired of having fistfights with Stewart backstage, from time to time. And then, even look at the Beatles, the biggest band of all time, and I think there was a resentment from Lennon that was like, oh, Paul gets all the girls screaming for him, and Paul gets the songs that go to number one for 10 weeks, and, I'm always getting put on the B-sides. And my songs deserve as much notoriety, as much focus as his. I'm going to go and have my own life. And George Harrison felt the same way too. And I just think that's the story of bands in general. That's kind of what happens over time. So the very things that bring you success are also the things that start driving wedges into what's going on,
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about that in the book, that kind of became a problem where there were two lead singers in Triumph, Gil, the drummer, and yourself, but you're the guy out front. You're the guy that's also playing guitar, and you're the guy whose songs and the ones that you sing were getting the bulk of the radio and the bulk of the success. So that led to, I mean, you actually told the story in the book. I don't know if it was Ron Nevison or one of the producers that had gotten involved in you with you guys and took a song and gave it to you that originally I think Gil was going to sing, and that caused a bit of a problem. And, I had heard, again, you're right, it's not an uncommon story. I remember, I think there was animosity with Heart because the number one song that they had, Nancy sang, not Ann, and that was always a thing. So that kind of stuff is there, and you dealt with it. It seemed like throughout much of the time in there. Was that one of the bigger? Because you said a couple of times in the book when it came to Triumph that before you actually did leave the band, you had thought about doing it much earlier, and you were almost kind of staying in there a bit reluctantly. So was that the biggest issue? I mean, I know that there was also this big, you owed the label $3 million. There was some business stuff that didn't go right as well.
Yeah. So that word reluctance, you've raised it again. And I think what happened is we got to about 84, like 83, we were trying to get away from RCA. We moved to MCA, and that created the huge, unrecouped debt. I'd been left to my own devices making the Thunder 7 album in the studio. And so there was a lot on that album that was complete fun for me, like the making of the Time Canon, which is, 55 tracks of lead vocals. And I had guitar piece, Midsummer Daydream was on that album. And there was a blues thing, Little Boy Blues. So I was on my own, and I was getting to do these things. They were all kind of like B cuts or C cuts, but I was always the kind of guy that was of a mind that I liked albums because I kind of liked B cuts, and I liked things that were off the beaten path, not the hits that were going to be the beaten path. And the record business was slowly but surely, and radio too, was turning into a beaten path kind of a thing where you put on an album and there had to be, Def Leppard would have 7 songs of the 10 that could all be singles, or Bryan Adams would have 10 out of 10 that could all be, So, and those things would become huge hits. That was the Nevison thing you mentioned, the Heart album. I don't know. The year that the record company was deciding, hey, Nevison would be a great guy for the Triumph thing, was because Nevison had done the trick with Starship and done it with Heart, where they weren't even songs that were necessarily written by the band. They were written by outside writers. Nevison would bring them to the band. He would do these kinds of arrangements and productions that radio would love, and then you'd have your big hits like We Built the City and These Dreams and What About Love, the huge hits. I think they sold like 5 million albums of that Heart thing in, one quarter, or one half of a year. And so that was what the industry was turning into. And I really, you talk about reluctance. I was kind of reluctant to be in that kind of a band, in that kind of a world, chasing that kind of a thing. I was a guy that had put Suitcase Blues on the Just a Game album, and that's more kind of the story of a big part of my career than, the writing of Somebody's Out There, which I did kind of overnight because the record company went, hey, we need a hit. We need a lead single. Can you write a lead single? I went, yeah, okay, I can write a lead single. Yeah, here. Somebody's Out There. And it was the highest charting song Triumph ever had on Billboard. But, was my heart in it? Yes, but, not all of my heart because, I wanted to be an artist. You sign a deal and the bottom line calls you a recording artist, and that's kind of what I wanted to be. I didn't want to necessarily be a pop star, never mind a rock star, and that was kind of what the business was turning into.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me about the Triumph years, and then I want to hit you with a couple other things here, but the other thing that struck me about that, and it's something that I always felt too. So I think Triumph's level of success, and you'd probably agree with this, at least here in America, was different market by market, because back in those days, independent radio stations existed, and you could have people that were champions in one market and you drive the band a lot more, like for you guys, Texas, in certain areas, and other areas where you didn't get radio. Now it's all consolidated. Everybody pretty much plays the same thing, but it wasn't like that back then. But you make the case, like with Triumph, it's pretty interesting because the band certainly got big and the band certainly got popular, certainly in certain pockets for sure. But the band, as popular as it got, never went to that next mega level. And you reference that in the book and you bring that up. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts as to why that is, why you didn't go to you got close, but you just never got over that next hump to the huge level of some of the other bands of that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Not the least of which was that the band did have a kind of a schizoid thing that it was trying to be because of two singers. Whereas the bands that did do that, and Journey would be a good example. Every record sound you go, yeah, that's Steve Perry. And I mean, if you think about it too, Journey was the kind of band where they had really highly skilled guys in the band that had a really good understanding of, okay, our bed tracks, we got to get, like Steve Smith's we got to get him as a drummer here. And they would replace members until they finally got to the point where they go, okay, this is the kind of stainless steel, chromium spine version of the band now that the from a commercial point of view, it can't be denied. And the world was heading to that, Mutt Lange was turning the trick for Bryan Adams, turning the trick for AC/DC, turning the trick for Def Leppard, eventually for Shania Twain. Like, that guy had an understanding of, no, this is how the industry works. This is how radio works. This is what the public now wants. And it's not all the public, but enough of it that it's going to turn that trick of 5 times platinum, 7 times platinum. It's going to find a mass market, And in later years, there were bands like Nickelback that understood that and was able to do that. And as you say, we have this consolidation now where, if you get that Clear Channel thing, hey, you're rocking. They don't even call it Clear Channel anymore, but that's the idea. There's this consolidation of playlisting so that you're going to get that. So that was already starting to happen, and Triumph was not really the kind of band that sat comfortably in that. I think the other thing too, which requires mentioning, is that the band we would play live, and that would be something people would come and see it and go, what a show. Like, whoa, what I'm a Triumph fan now, man. Like, I'm never going to miss them when they come to town. They're great. So we were good at selling concert tickets in places where we built it up, and you kind of needed airplay and concerts at the same time in order to make a market happen like that. But there were some places, as you said, we never got any airplay, so we never went there. We went and toured England and Scotland once, and then I think it was like 80, 81, and we never went back. We went like, wow, that was hard, and small things, and people didn't really get what we're about. We'd much rather go to San Diego in the wintertime, So we would only ever tour the United States and Canada, and we wouldn't really break other markets. Whereas, this large-scale thing you're talking about, I was just reading the thing about McCartney going to Australia and doing a tour, and I'm going, oh, yeah. Like, Dave Grohl seems to have, like, just a bottomless ambition and energy so that he tours Asia and Australia, and he goes out with other bands, and he's just constantly working. And in my band, we had guys that, like, I wanted to be at home with my kids. I wanted to go to parents' night. I wanted to coach my kids playing, neighborhood sports. Gil wanted to play golf. Mike liked to go to Jamaica in the winters. So we weren't so consumed with the idea of we must keep driving this machine. This rock and roll machine must be driven until we've sold 10 million records.